say these chains will never break, but they don't know you like we do. There is power in your name. We've heard that there is no way through. We've heard the tide will never change. They haven't seen what you can do. There is power in your name. So much power in your name. Move the immovable, break the unbreakable. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. From the impossible, we'll see a miracle. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. We know that hope is never lost. Oh, for there is still an empty grave. God, we believe no matter what, there is power in your name. So much power in your name. Move the immovable, break the unbreakable. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. From the impossible, we'll see a miracle. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. You are the way when there seems to be no way. We trust in you, God, you have the final say. You are the way when there seems to be no way. Yes, you are. We trust in you, God, you have the final say. You have the final say. Move the immovable, break the unbreakable. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. From the impossible, we'll see a miracle. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. God, we believe. God, we believe for my eyes on your faithfulness.
Evening, everyone. How are you guys doing? Good. All right, great. Well, I'm glad that you guys are here. We are doing our second masterclass tonight. Last week, we talked about how does the gospel affect my life. If you missed it, it actually is up on YouTube. We have some great clips from last week and lots of good things. So it is on YouTube, the whole thing. So we would love for you guys to check that out. One of the reasons why we call these master classes, not because I'm a master of anything, but because each week is kind of isolated. So while there will be a few things from last week that pertain to this week, today is kind of isolated in itself, just like how last week was kind of in itself. We're answering one question each week. So obviously church things, they all correlate, they all cross over. You can't talk about Scripture and Jesus and divide everything up. But we won't be talking a whole lot about what the gospel does to our life this week, because that's what we talked about last week. So this week, we are touching on a topic that I think is very important, and that is answering the question, why is it important to do life with others? This is a question that really does pertain a lot. We're, in a couple of weeks, at the beginning of April, going to be starting our community groups, and we would love for everyone to be part of community groups. And as we build up to that, we really thought it's really important to talk to people about doing life with each other in community. So that is what we will be talking about tonight. Those of you joining us online, I hope you guys can discuss in the chat as well. We're glad you guys are here. We're going to be, if you were here last week, you kind of know the drill. If you aren't, that's okay. We'll fill you in as we go. So the way this works is I don't just teach for 2 hours. That would be pretty boring, honestly, for you guys and myself. And so we do it a little bit differently. So we have teaching and we have discussion kind of mixed together because I think that's the best way for everyone to learn. If you've ever done something where you've talked about it with someone, there are actually studies show that you retain information and understanding more when you discuss it with someone else rather than just listening. So we're engaging multiple parts of you. So I actually want us to start with some discussion tonight. So I know I haven't taught anything, and that's the way I would like it. I would like to start in a couple of groups. So we'll probably have to move the chairs, and that's okay. We'll move them back. But I would love for you guys to get into 2 or 3 groups around the room, and we're going to start our discussion with a couple of questions. And those are, what does the term community mean to you? Okay. I know it's a basic question, but I think it's really important, okay? If we don't begin with an understanding, or at least understand where each of us individually begin, it's going to be tougher to learn and grow. So what does the term community mean to you? Have you had generally positive or negative experience with community? I would love for you to share a story or two, if you could. And then lastly, how do you think American culture views the concept of community? I see a couple of you taking pictures of those questions. That's awesome. I'll leave them up there. And I'll actually leave them up there the whole time. So I would love for you guys just to go ahead and break up into groups of anywhere between 4 and 6 people around the room. You can kind of shuffle some chairs together. And I'm going to step off the stage, and I want you guys just to discuss a little bit and talk to each other. And in a handful of minutes, I will bring you guys back in. minute before we go ahead, so start wrapping up here in the next minute or so. I think I'm going to bring you guys back in. You're not done. I know. I'm sure if I never came back on stage, you guys could just talk until 8:30, and then you would all go home. I will have you guys back discussing. So if you want to just move seats and leave your chairs where they are, this group just kind of spun around, nice and efficient. But yeah, you guys can leave those chairs up in circles. That's totally fine. No, that's okay. It doesn't always need to be efficient. That's all right. But I want to keep going. You guys, if you have time, we're going to be discussing actually 2 more times tonight. So if one of those discussions is shorter and you want to hop back to this, that's great. But I will have more questions for you. Don't worry. So I just want to go through a little bit of what you talked about and then go into a little bit more beyond that. So I want to talk about the culture. And I'm not talking particularly about Calvary or even the church. This coincides with that third question I had you guys ask yourselves. What do you think American culture says about community? And I actually heard someone say, and I thought this was great. I'm not going to just steal just their answer, but it was so good I thought I'd share. I heard someone say, it's like keeping up with the Joneses instead of relating to the Joneses. And I really feel like that is a great description of community in our current culture. Because there's a lot of self involved. There's a lot of like inward looking, and a lot of community has to do with proximity. So my community is those who are close to me. Not who I am close to, but who's close to me. And I know that sounds, if you were here last week, words are particular to me. So like those differences matter. Who I am close to, yes, I'm still the subject, but the emphasis is on who I am near, rather than who is close to me, places the emphasis on myself, rather than those who I'm around. So all of you guys are watching me. The emphasis is on me, instead of I am teaching you guys. Now the emphasis is on you. And I feel like in our culture, a lot of the emphasis is on the self, the individual. So who is in proximity to me? Who is close to me? That could be defined as someone's community. Community are your friends. Not just people you love, but who is close to you? Who do you talk to? Who do you listen to? Who do you interact with? Again, it's still often me-focused, I-focused, self-focused. And I think that's a very big distinction between what we are going for and talking about tonight and what we may or may not typically encounter when we leave a church or a place like this. Is community is not meant to be me-centered. It's us. It's not me, it's us. I would say, this is an opinion, but I would say community is not highly valued in American culture. Some places it is, but I also think in those places where they like community, they're in like-minded groups. So one of the communities I'm a part of is at my gym. It's the same gym Billy goes to, but they talk about being a community, which is awesome. They are great at it, but the community is for all of those people who like CrossFit. And if you don't like CrossFit, You will not be a part of that community, probably by your own choice. But there's a barrier there. There's a wall there. Yeah, so just like how there's, biker groups or young mom groups or those who drive hot rods, whatever it is, those can be communities, and those are fine. I'm not like saying they're bad, but each of those has a wall. There's something that gathers people together, not just being human, being alive. And the community Jesus talks about, which we'll get to, doesn't have those barriers. It's inclusive to everyone. I would also say American views on community also elevate like lone wolves, those who go about it on their own, or those who have the rags to riches story. Because if you tell a story about someone who had nothing and they grew up and they did all this and now they are, a multimillionaire or a celebrity, it's always emphasizing them, but no one ever talks about all the people who helped them get there. I'm a sports guy, so I apologize that there's another pastor talking about sports on this stage. But one thing that I've actually enjoyed more about sports over the last 10 years is the amount of athletes who try to elevate their parents. So when they are finally, an all-star or they make it to the NBA or whatever, they talk about how mom and dad drove them to practice 7 times a week. And they took them to all these AAU games, and they did this, and they're recognizing that, yeah, I'm now in the NBA, but I didn't get here by myself. But our culture doesn't like that. Our culture most often focuses on the one, the lone wolf, the rags to riches individual, me, myself, and I. And I want to paint the picture over the next hour and a half or so about a community that doesn't really look like that. It does involve you, and it does involve me, but it's not centered on you. It's not centered on me. So I'm going to begin by answering the question that we actually began with tonight. So why is it important to do life with others? And there's a handful of answers that I think go along with this. So if you're taking notes, you can. I love the whole taking pictures of slides. I think that's genius. I hate handwriting stuff. I don't do that sort of thing. There are paper and pen in the back if you like to do that. That's all on you. That is not how I roll. So the first reason why I think it's important to do life with others is because we can't bear to do life alone. And how often do we try? How often do we try to do life by ourselves? And when I say do life, I really am trying to be as broad as possible. Because, okay, there are some things that you should do alone. Like, I don't need someone to help me brush my teeth. That's kind of bizarre if I ask Kaylee to come in and brush my teeth for me. I think she'd say no. I'm not certain. But that's not really what I mean. I'm saying in the day-to-day, as life goes on, morning to evening to morning to evening to morning to evening, we're not meant to do all of that by ourselves. You can go back to the Genesis story, and one of the earliest pieces of that story talks about how God made Adam. He said, man's not meant to be alone. So there's all the animals, and there's no one good enough for Adam, so Eve is made. And now they're a pair, and they do life together. We are not meant to be alone. And I think if God had made Eve first, I would say Adam would show up at the same timeline. God is saying we're not meant to do life alone. In Galatians, Paul actually, he says, bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Now that phrase law of Christ is interesting. It's in contrast to law of the Old Testament. So in the Old Testament, if you're unaware, there were so many laws about how to do almost anything, whether it be how to farm and how to make your crop, how to engage with the Sabbath, how to interact with foreigners, how to, like everything, religious laws, civic laws, personal laws, so many laws, it's hard to keep track how many there were. They even have laws of what to do if an animal falls in a pit on the Sabbath. What do? There's a law for that. So there's this contrast between the law of the Old Testament, which is very legalistic, which when we talk about the Old Testament law, sometimes it does get a bad rap. That's what God called the people to do, and they did it. So I want to give them that, okay? So yeah, we try to not be legalistic now, but in the Old Testament, following the law was the thing to do. Okay, that was the following God thing, was following the law. But if you move into the New Testament, Christ comes, in Luke it says, I've come to fulfill the law, not erase the law, but to fulfill it and to bring it to completion. And that is that law of Christ. So often in the Gospels, you see Jesus push back on a scribe or a Pharisee or Sadducee, these religious leaders, because of who they are and what they're doing. And a lot of the times, they're actually obeying the law to the letter, but they're missing the heart of the law. So one example is there was a Sabbath where Jesus and his disciples were walking through fields of grain, and one of the disciples plucked some grain off the top and ate it. And a Pharisee said, hey, you broke the law. You harvested on the Sabbath. It's true. And Jesus pushed back on them, and he ended up saying, did God make man to follow the Sabbath, or did God give the Sabbath for man to use? And his point was, God didn't make a day of rest so that humans could follow the law and have a day of rest. He gave a day of rest for people to rest. So there's the difference between following the letter of the law and following the heart of the law. And that's what Paul is saying. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. By bearing the burdens of one another, we follow the heart of Jesus. We follow what he has called us to. And I think it's interesting, 2 verses before this, so that's Galatians 6:2, but in 5:13, so at the very end of the chapter right before it, Paul says, for you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence. And I think a lot of pastors stop there. They say, no, this isn't for self-indulgence. It's for something else. And I would agree, but it goes on. But through love, become slaves to one another. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. As we once were slaves to sin, we are now called to be slaves or servants to one another, to care for our brothers and sisters. That is Christ's emphasis to us. Hey, you once lived this way. Now you need to live that way. That's how I made you to be. We see an example of this early on in the church in the book of Acts. So this is in my favorite, it's called a pericope. You know those chunks of the Bible that have like titles over the top of them? And then sometimes they're like a paragraph, sometimes they're like 3 pages. But there's like this big all bold title that's called a pericope. And it really breaks up the Bible into sections, I guess you could say. So this is my favorite one. It's right after, so at the beginning of the book of Acts, Jesus ascends to heaven. He says, go make disciples of all the earth. The angels tell the disciples, why are you looking up? Go out. The Lord will visit you the day of Pentecost. The Holy Spirit comes, fills all of them, and then they go out and they preach the good news to all those who are in Jerusalem in those people's native tongues. Crazy cool story. That's in Acts 1. Peter goes through, he teaches all about Jesus as the people can relate to it. And at the end of that, they said they were cut to the heart, and they asked Peter what to do, and he said, repent and be baptized. And then in verses 2:42 through 45, I believe, or no, through 48, it talks about the very beginnings of the church. And it's wonderful. And a lot of pastors would love to go back to it, and a lot of it we can't go back to. It just doesn't work that way. That's how it worked when there were 5,000 Christians in Jerusalem. There's probably more than 5,000 Christians in our city, let alone how many Christians are in the world. So we can't exactly do exactly as they did, but there are pieces of what they did that can carry over and should carry over for all time. And this is one of them. In Acts 2:44 through 45, it says, all who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute their proceeds to all as any had need. I think that's a pretty incredible scripture. Not just because they would sell their possessions and goods and they had all things in common, but they distribute to all as any had need. They took care of each other. These were people that didn't know each other. At that time, it was the time of Pentecost, and people would come and offer the sacrifice of first fruits to God in the city, at the temple in Jerusalem. That means many people who were outside came into the city to offer their sacrifice. So Peter and John and the disciples, they didn't know everyone who was coming in. It wasn't like, they just met, someone. It was all new, and they all had everything in common, and they took care of each other as any had need. That is a piece of the church that can live forever. And that is an aspect of community. They had all things in common. This is translated a couple different ways in different versions of Scripture, and that's okay. But the whole point was everything was made available to those who needed it. If someone had no food and someone had a lot of food, they would give to the one who needed food. If someone had a tattered shirt that was falling off, if someone had 2 shirts, they'd give to the one who needed it. There was no need among them. Everyone was taken care of. That's a beautiful piece of what community is. And we'll talk about how this works here in just a few minutes. But I want you to remember that we can't bear the burden of life alone. We weren't made that way. God intended us to bear the burden of life with other people. Hands down, together. Okay, I want to keep going. Second reason why it's important is because growth is reciprocal. I love that word, not just because it sounds cool. But reciprocal, have you ever heard that something is reciprocated? People used to talk about that in relationships. It just wasn't reciprocated. So if I'm giving, that other person is giving back. That means it's reciprocal. I imagine like this cycle where you have two arrows on each side, and it's just cycling through. It's reciprocal. This person gives, they receive, and then they give. And one receives, and then they give. It's a cycle. So that's not just giving goods, okay, like we just read in the book of Acts, but that's everything. That's growth. So yeah, in community, there should be no need. We shouldn't have someone living in a palace and someone starving without clothes on the side of the road in the same community. That shouldn't work. But in this moment, I'm talking about growth. So I didn't say giving is reciprocal, which it could be, but growth is reciprocal. So as I grow, often I believe if I'm involved properly in a community, that will cause others to grow. And then those people growing will then in turn cause me to grow. And it's this idea of, have you heard the phrase iron sharpens iron? That's actually a proverb. It's in Proverbs 27. And it's that phrase that as iron hits itself, they both get sharp. It's not iron dulls the other iron, but one gets sharp and the other doesn't. No, iron sharpens iron. So as we grow together, we grow together. And I think that's really important. So community develops us and community sharpens us. A lot of times people, we talked about American community wanting the lone wolf. Yeah, there are some lone wolves that have done some pretty incredible things. But I would also say if we take a deep dive into the whole view of their life, they're not perfect. I'd probably bet a lot of money on that they aren't perfect. There are areas where they didn't learn because they were by themselves, and there was no one there to tell them, hey, you need to learn this. Hey, maybe this is a mistake. Hey, maybe you should work on this a little bit because you're a great person and I want you to grow. I was pondering this whole night a couple of days ago. And like you, I'm human. So like you, I get frustrated at people sometimes. Maybe that's just me. But this thought came to me. And if you don't write anything down, maybe this one thing. Okay, and I think this might have come from the Lord, so not even myself. I'm not saying God said this. It just like that was the magnitude of the thought in my mind. It was a question. Okay, so it wasn't even a statement. It was a question that was asked to me. And the question is, how do we know that we aren't called to live in community so that we encounter people that push us and drive us nuts and annoy us as avenues for us to grow, to become more merciful and more graceful like Jesus? Okay, that was really long, so I want to say it again. How do we know that we aren't called to live in community so that we encounter people that push us and drive us nuts and annoy us as avenues for us to grow to become more merciful and graceful and like Jesus? I think so often we have this sunshine picture and we're like, yes, I'll be in this community, I'm all in, and then people start to annoy us and they drive us nuts. And we're just so aggravated and we're like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be around them anymore. I think I got to go, and then we just leave. How do we know that we aren't meant to encounter people in that way? I am sure I have annoyed people. I actually know for a fact in the last 7 days I have aggravated somebody or multiple somebodies. So I'm not perfect in this. How do we know that that's not intentional? We all talk about this perfect community. How do we know that we aren't meant to encounter those negative things so that we can grow? Not so that we can point the finger at someone else and say, hey, you need to figure this out because it's driving me crazy. Yeah, maybe we can help them in love, but maybe it's a way for me to become more merciful. Like, yeah, I just need to relax. They're doing their thing, but they've had a rough couple of weeks. Maybe I need to become more graceful. Like, you know what? I could say something, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to put it aside and just keep loving them because that's what Jesus calls me to do. It's not easy. It sounds really easy because I get to just say it on stage to an imaginary nobody, but in reality, it's really difficult. But if you are always alone, and you are always the one who is the most important, how would you ever grow in grace and mercy? How would you ever learn that you aren't the center of it all? How would we ever do that if we were only ever by ourselves? So I think that's a really important part of community. All right, so as you can see, I don't have a bowling ball up on the stage. That was great, by the way. But I did receive a lot of positive feedback about the hands-on interaction. So we have a little bit more of that tonight. So I would love if I could have 2 volunteers, brave volunteers. There's no bowling balls involved. We got 1. We got 2. All right, could you guys come up here and stand behind this table for me? I promise you nothing's going to come swinging from the rafters. I mean, at least nothing on purpose. Okay, so I'm going to come down here, work with you guys. All right, how are you guys doing? Good. Can you shout your name for everyone to know who you are? I'm Dan. Teresa. All right, so I have a very difficult challenge for you two this morning, or this not morning. I'm always in here in the mornings. This evening. So we have these 2 5-piece preschool puzzles. Okay, you're a mom. I'm sure you've seen these. If you need help at this stage, I'd be a little concerned. So I am going to ask you guys to put these puzzles together. Sounds simple enough, right? Okay. Let me count, make sure it's fair. Okay, you each have 5 pieces. Dan has the desserts puzzle, and Teresa has the crayons puzzle, so there's different colors. Now, the catch, which there obviously is a catch, is you guys are going to be blindfolded. Okay? So, Teresa, if you wouldn't mind, actually, I'll let you hold it for a second. If you would like, you can put them on yourself. If you need help, let me know. So, we're going on the honor system. I folded it, so I don't think you should be able to see through it. Yeah, I guess you don't need those glasses. Okay, so I'm going to, in a second, not just yet, I'm going to ask you to put together these puzzles blindfolded. You guys good? Can you see? All right, that's a no. You would have flinched if you would have seen. All right, before you get started, though, I need 2 more volunteers. I'm telling you, there's no bowling balls. This one's like way less hazardous than last week. No one? No? Oh. Alan, all right? We need 1 more. Just come on up. I don't even need to call you up. Oh. All right, so I'm going to have both of you guys come over here on Teresa's side. Yep, over here. Teresa, I'm going to have you scoot to your right just a hair. Okay, I moved the puzzle. Take another step to your right. You're good. I can see. I know you can't. Okay, so here's the catch. Teresa, you actually have 2 people that are going to help you put together this puzzle. So you guys, you are not allowed to touch the puzzle pieces, only Teresa, but you can help her. You can coach her. You can tell her like, what her hand is close to, where pieces go. If you look closely, it actually says what piece goes where on the little puzzle thing. So the answer key is there. Dan, you're on your own, man.
All right.
We'll see how it goes. All right. This is a race, so we're going to see who can finish this puzzle first, okay? All right. On your mark, get set, go. Okay. You're doing great. That is the back of the puzzle. You're doing great, Dan.
I think I saw this one, so I might have cheated a little bit.
Oh, you guys are doing good. Dan has finished 1 piece. Teresa's about to finish a 2nd piece. How's it going, Dan? How's it?
I have no idea.
You're doing great, I think. this is a preschool puzzle, Dan. What's going on? What's taking so long? I know it did. It did.
It seemed like I was so close there.
We'll see. He's getting there.
Hey,
Maybe.
maybe. I don't even know if I have them. There it is.
We're getting there.
Couldn't have been one with the big long
think-
head.
I think Teresa's got one piece left. Oh. We're getting close. Teresa's almost there. Dan has two pieces in place, just for everyone watching at home. He is. He's got a smile on his face. We're close. Teresa's close.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Wait. That feels right.
Alan, are they kind of like popping out? All right, you're almost there. I'm almost going to call it.
Oh, I gotta be close. Gotta be close.
All right, there. Okay, time.
All right.
Dan, you did complete your puzzle. Great. Teresa, I let you go on for a long time. You had your pieces in the right place for a very long time, I will say. They were just like a little off, and I think they might be bent a little bit. Everyone give them a hand. You can take your blindfold off. Honestly, I think I might have called it, or I should have called it, because you were like trying to get them just close, and then they kind of went. But no, you guys did great. You can have a seat. Thank you.
Seeing
Great.
the first two pieces definitely helped.
Just a little bit. All right, so before I hop back in, Dan, how did that feel? Like as you were kind of going through that, and you were, I mean, I know I was next to you, but I really wasn't a whole lot of help. Did you feel lost? Yeah. Teresa, did you have any reassurance knowing that there were two people coaching you? Yeah. So again, they're preschool puzzles. If this is a real obstacle in your life, please call me. I'll help you out. I could be there for this one. But I think it's really silly, but I think it's a good illustration of a lot of things in life. There are some things that maybe we think they're easy, or we want them to be easy. But if we're by ourselves, it doesn't always work. It's not always as easy as it could be. And whether we finish it or not, I think the one thing I pointed out that I think is important is Dan said he felt kind of lost. And I know you guys probably couldn't hear him because he was, kindly trying to be, not shouting, but he was like, I don't even know if I have another piece left. And then there was a point where he had like the pie. It was in the right place, but then he moved it out of the right place, trying to fit it somewhere else because he didn't know what was even in his hand. And as I watched Teresa, I probably picked the most warped puzzle for her to use because those pieces were like doing one of these. But she had everything in place. She had to get them like, kind of to fit together. That was a little tough. But every time she grabbed a piece, they would say, okay, this goes right in the middle. This top right, take that to the top right. And then she'd be able to kind of shift it around and try to get it close. And she said there was some reassurance there. So as we grow, as we walk, as we do all of these things in a community, that's what this puzzle on my left represents. Yeah, we may feel like we're blindfolded. It may feel like something that's easy that's become really, really difficult. But if we aren't going through it alone, maybe it's a little bit easier. And if it's not easier, at least we know we're not going through it alone. It's not difficult and isolating. It might just be difficult. Because there's going to be some things in life that are going to be tough no matter what. There's some things in life that hopefully they're easy no matter what. But just every time I heard Dan just saying, I don't know if there's another piece. I have no idea what this is doing. You know, stuff is like slipping and sliding. He like went to grab a piece and he put his hand right over it. It was right here and he went right above it. That's to me, that's an easy illustration of what community does. It helps us have guidance. We weren't made to do life alone. And together is the only way that we can walk in the fullness of Christ. But there's another aspect to this that I want to add on to, is that we all have gifts. So if you've been in our Rooted class, we have everyone take a spiritual gifts test. Billy, a couple weeks ago, actually encouraged everyone to do it, and he stuck them out on the table. Those aren't the only gifts you have. Those are spiritual gifts. Some people also have gifts of strength or entrepreneurship or parenting or whatever. There's so many gifts out there. As a community, we are meant to do this together. And the reason why we're meant to do it together is because we all have strengths and weaknesses. So Paul talks about boasting in his weaknesses, and he says, because Christ can come through and shine and where he is weakest, that's the community. In the day-to-day, Christ is enacted in the community to meet each other's weaknesses. So there's things I'm good at. I know there are things I'm good at. And I know there's things I'm bad at. I'm not good at them. As a community, if we all do what we can and lift each other up, no one is going to fall. Iron sharpens iron. You're strong where I'm weak, and I'm strong where you're weak. And across the room, each of you is strong where someone else is weak. And that's why we do life together, because there are some things that you've asked me a question, I'll give you the answer, it'll be correct, it'll be quick, and it'll be so wise. There's other things you ask me, and I was like, I have no idea what you're even talking about. I have no idea how to help you. I have no idea where to even direct you to get help. But I know someone in this room probably could. That's because we all had different gifts. In 1 Corinthians 12, Paul talks about spiritual gifts, and in verse 12 to 31, he uses an illustration of the body. Raise your hand if you have a body. If you're not raising your hand, I don't know how you're here. Okay, we all have bodies. I'm staring at them. Okay, he calls the church a body. And a lot of times we use this illustration from the stage to talk about not making others feel bad for not being this or not doing that. And that's fine. But that still isn't what Paul meant. It's not just an encouragement to love everyone, love the toes and the ears and the nose. Yes, please do. But it's a deeper symbolism that the body, every piece of the body is meant to function in a certain way. Yes, there's some things that you might like more. I'm a thinker. I love my brain. But have you ever jammed your finger and then realized how often you use that finger every time you grab something and it hurts really bad? I had no idea how many times I used this knuckle on my finger until I jammed it. And then every 60 seconds I'd be in pain because I used it all the time. I never think about the middle knuckle of the center finger on my right hand, but I use it all the time because I have a body and it works together. It works in concert and harmony. And that's what the church is called to be. That's the community we are called to be. We're not all called to look the same, be the same, act the same, have the same strengths, have the same weaknesses. Our beauty is found in our differences. Our beauty is found that person A has this strength and person B has that strength, and they cancel each other's weaknesses out. That's the beauty of community. And it's not just we're all wanted, we're all needed to function properly. Yes, you can adapt to not having a limb or to not having an ear or not being able to see. Yes, you can adapt, but I think if you ask anyone that has to adapt, if they had the choice, and I don't mean this crudely, but if they had the choice, they would rather not have to adapt. They would rather be able to hear. They would rather have all their limbs, stuff like that. And that's functioning in our most flourishing way. So growth is reciprocal. I'm going to keep going because we got a couple more before our next discussion. Third reason why it's important is the gospel is personal. The gospel is personal. At the end of Matthew, and even at the beginning of the book of Acts, Jesus uses the phrase, go and make disciples. And in 20th century America and now 21st century America, a lot of times that phrase means get people to raise their hand to a prayer. Get them to say yes to Jesus. And just like we talked about last week, I'm not discouraging people accepting Christ, but I am discouraging that that's the finish line. That's actually the starting line. That's the beginning of the walk with Christ. And because of this rise and just kind of saying a prayer, doing one thing, and the rise of so much desire for size and growth in churches, is there's a rise in anonymity. It's another big word. So being anonymous. So it's the idea that I can walk into a church, listen to some worship, hear a message from a pastor, pass a plate in front of me, and walk out the building without ever telling anyone my name or anything about myself. Hopefully that's not true here, but I know for a fact that is true in churches. I've been in them, more than one of them, probably more than 5 of them. It's the belief that it's okay to just walk in and out and never talk to anybody. Yeah, there's some people that they want to just kind of be on their own for the first times. I know sometimes walking into a church is a tough experience for people, so that's not what I'm talking about. It's the idea that I can attend a church for 6 months or 8 months and be anonymous. No one will know anything about me. And that misses out on the beauty of Jesus. That misses out on the beauty of the church. That misses out on the beauty of community. It's like this idea of like being part of a club rather than a community. Like for a while, like Kaylee and I, we have a Costco membership. I walk into Costco, no one asks me what my name is. They don't say, what's your card? Or where's your card? You raise it. Great, what's your name? No. Say, yes, thank you. Move on. And then I go and buy bulk snacks. That's a club, and that's fine. That's what it's meant to be. I don't need anyone to know my name at Costco. But that's not the church. The church isn't just a club. It's not a place just that you go and you punch your card on Sundays and leave. You don't just walk and say, yep, here's my tithe, drop it in the bucket and walk out. It's so much more than that. I was walking through our Rooted class with someone this past Sunday, and we were talking about church membership. And membership is really tied to being a part of a community. We have members here because we want people to commit to this community. That's really the majority of what it is. There's some legal church stuff that happens, voting for things. But for the most part, we want people to become members to commit to a place, to commit to a community. And I said, if you are a part of a church for a really long time and you don't get involved in the community, most of the time you do the stuff that isn't good. I have to go there every week. I probably have to go there sometime during the middle of the week. I have to give my money. I have to volunteer. And I have to talk to people I don't like. That's if we come at it with the perspective that lacks community, that lacks Jesus. But if I recognize what Jesus has done in me and what he's done in all of us, and this moves from club to community, well, I get to join my friends and family in worship on Sundays. I get to come on a Wednesday night and learn more about Jesus and Scripture and prayer and life. I get to give my money to the mission of the Lord. I get to serve someone else. I get to love someone who doesn't get loved very often. The actions could look exactly the same, but how you take it in heart is the big difference. So again, from one person doing the same things to another, the difference is, are you a part of a community, or are you just attending a church? Are you just walking in and out? So as we kind of fight this idea of anonymity, I want to go back to the idea of the illustration of the body. I don't think you ever look at your hand and say, oh my gosh, I've never noticed that finger before, at least not at this stage of your life. You didn't just grow another finger, you're used to it. Same with the body of Christ. People aren't supposed to be surprises. There's not supposed to be this oh my gosh, I never knew you. I had no idea who you were. I've never interacted with you. And being in a community like this where we're not 20 people, you're going to miss some people. But ideally, there's nobody who's unknown. by somebody. You're not going to know everybody, but hopefully everybody knows someone. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of these churches have gone towards this more anonymous style of church is because people don't want to let themselves become known, and they don't want to let themselves become known because one of the biggest fears of humanity is to be known and not be loved, is that people know who I am and they reject me. They say, yes, Eric, I know you, you're tall, you have dark hair, you like sports, and you teach sometimes. Yeah, I'm not a fan. No thanks. It's kind of terrifying. But I think when we shield ourselves off from that, we miss all the blessing, we miss all the good. Because one of the beauties of the gospel is that Jesus came to earth to walk with humanity. He became human, he became known to us so that we could become known to him. And as we are known to him, he loves us. So there's that fear that we're going to be known and not loved. Well, in Jesus, we're known and loved. So we can come to a community and say, hey, I want to be known, and I'm going to trust that I can be loved here in all of who I am. Whether it looks great or not. What did it say before? A community took care of everyone as any had need. Sometimes we limit that to just money or things, but sometimes people need emotional help. Sometimes they need spiritual help. Okay, so the gospel is personal. Just like Jesus, we're called to be personal in our faith and what we do. And the way we do this is through vulnerability. I've thrown out all the big words tonight, so you can take that home and share it with people. No, vulnerability is the only way to become known. When you're vulnerable, what do? You take down the barriers, you're honest with other people, and you say, this is the real me. This is who I am. And in true community, we share who we really are. Now, that is one of the reasons why we're pushing community groups, because we don't need everyone to walk up on the stage, share their deepest, darkest secrets with everyone in the room and everyone online and hope that it's okay. That's terrifying. I will probably never do that. And by probably, I mean I won't. But that's what a community group is for. Hey, there's 8 to 10 other people here that I can trust, that I can be honest with, that I can be vulnerable with, that I can share a little bit of myself with. So the last thing before we go into our groups, so we have, why is it important to do life? Because we can't bear the burden of life alone, because growth is reciprocal, because the gospel is personal, and because we make the future together. This is a concept that some people don't like, and that's okay. Yes, I do believe God is all-powerful, that he does have a plan, but I also believe that at the same exact time he gave us free will, and we are called to create life and make life. Not new life out of nothing, but what does the future hold? We're called to make that. Does the future look more like Jesus? Well, it depends if we decide to make it look more like Jesus. And when we're all focused on Jesus and me, and not Jesus and us, it's really hard to make a future because I'm still focused on me. Jesus didn't come to be just Jesus, just himself. He probably wouldn't have taken the cross if he did. But he did take the cross, and he prayed for us beforehand because it was Jesus and all of God's children. Every single one of them. As the gospel changes us, what we talked about last week, as the gospel changes us and we walk in that change together, we make the future that is in front of us. So as we all grow together and iron sharpens iron and we use our gifts together, we will live lives as a community that, furthers the mission but makes the world look more like Christ. Sometimes on accident. Like we don't always have to have some big grand direction to love people. But if we're all loving people together, the world's going to look a whole lot different. So we make the future together. All right, I've talked for far too long, so it's time for you guys to talk to each other. So here's our second round of discussion questions. These are simpler, but maybe more difficult, okay? So with your group, I'd love for you to answer these questions. Has there ever been a time when you couldn't solve a problem on your own, but someone else was able to help you solve it? Share that story. Then I have the phrase, okay, we did this last week. There's the phrase, vulnerability is needed to flourish in community. Okay, that's a statement I'm making. Vulnerability is needed to flourish in community. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? And if so, tell your group why. And is being vulnerable scary to you? Again, this is a time to be vulnerable, talking about being vulnerable. Okay, we're going to set the bar low. All right. Vulnerability is needed to flourish in community. Do you agree or disagree? Is being vulnerable scary to you? All right. Gather together in your groups, answer those questions, and I'll come up here with my 1-minute warning in just a little bit. All right, guys, you got about 1 minute to wrap up, and we're going to keep going. All right, I know you guys are still talking, but I am going to apologize that I got to bring you back in. You'll have one more discussion time before we're done, all right? This one's a little bit shorter. You tell me to wait, Gerardo? All right, well, I just want to say I love all the discussion. I can hear a little bit piecemeal from all around, but if not, like, above all, like, awesome job interacting with each other. I love that. Like, that is awesome, and that might be even more important than anything I say to you from up here. Thank you. How kind. Not true. That's what we heard. Okay, so the last couple of things. So I want to talk about how this is what we would call the beautiful community. And I know that may be like an odd term to say, but I think there's something really beautiful about what Jesus has intended the church to be. And we see in Acts chapter 2 what that really means. So we were just there when they talked about giving, distributing their goods to all who had need. Right after that, they talked about what they did. So day by day, this is the church, okay, the new disciples. As they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. The thing I want to point out here is really just one thing. There's a lot of great things to take from this. I think this is a great scripture you could ponder and pray over for a day or a week or more. But the last sentence, and day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. I think a lot of times we make saving people this mission, and we try to find all these tactics to do it. If we look at the early church, what brought them in? And day by day, they had flashy lights, and they took tracts to people's mailboxes, and they shouted how much they should go to church with them when they walked through the mall and on Facebook. No, sorry. None of those things. They spent much time together in the temple. There was no church. The early church, they were Jewish. Jesus was Jewish, so they were still Jewish. They were Messianic Jews, the term. They broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts. They had great dinners together. They praised God, and they had the goodwill of all the people. I don't see any church growth strategy. I don't see any mission first, whatever. I see people following Jesus, people loving each other, people engaging in dinner together and learning together and growth together and love together. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who are being saved. There is something so special about the community God has intended us to have. earlier in one of the Gospels, Jesus says that his disciples will be known by their love, not known by their Facebook statuses, not known by what they watch on television or what they don't watch on television, not known by anything. They will be known by their love. And the early church expressed that love, and people knew it. People saw it. They would walk into the room and say, something's different about this place. That's the beautiful community. God has intended us to be in such beautiful community with each other that when someone walks into our midst, they say, something's different about this place. It's not bad, but I just can't put my finger on it. Something's different. And it's not because of any specific thing except we love each other. We care for each other. We've gathered together, and we break bread in homes together, and we have goodwill together and love others together. The beauty of the church community comes from each person caring and sharing their gifts. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's not as many people as we can fit in chairs in front of a stage and the people on stage sharing their gifts. Excuse me. It's everyone sharing their gifts. All of us. My gift might be teaching. I'm here teaching right now. But that doesn't mean you don't have gifts. This is just what mine is. You have gifts that I don't have. If you are not a pastor, I assure you, you have beautiful gifts that pastors do not have. And there are many of those. So that is the beautiful community. So I want to end with the how. How do we do this? Because if you've ever been in any message or lesson of mine, I am a theory person. I love the contextual, but when it gets to stuff like this, if it just ends in theory, I feel like I kind of wasted my time. Like, sweet, that community looks awesome. Great, Eric, thanks. Have a good night. There's more to it than that, okay? So I want to start by sharing an illustration. I didn't come up with this, but it was the best thing I've heard, so I'm sharing it with you. So how do we begin to develop this community? And I would talk about the 3 circles. Okay, so this isn't new. You might have seen this before. If you have, awesome. If you haven't, that's great. If you're taking notes, draw 3 circles if you'd like, or you could take your notes on your phone. You can draw it with your finger. That's fun. So this is supposed to represent your relational life. Okay, these 3 circles. So you have the center circle. These are your intimate relationships. If you're married, your spouse goes in this circle. And they are a special part of that circle. But I would argue that they aren't the only one that belongs in that circle, okay? So I'm not talking about marriage. You can have an intimate relationship with someone and not be married to them healthily, okay? I know you can have an intimate and unhealthy and wrong relationship. I'm not talking about that. But you can have intimate friendships, okay? That is a real thing. That is a good thing, okay? In Scripture, people would compare this circle with the 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John. Jesus had his intimate relationships. Those 3 guys, they were with him everywhere. If he wasn't by himself, but he wasn't with the 12, he was with the 3. He took them to the Mount of Transfiguration. Those were his intimate friendships, okay? They saw him at his most vulnerable, who he is, God speaking to his son, saying, this is my son, listen to him. Okay, intimate relationships. Outside, you have this ring. Those are your close friendships. Okay, these are people you interact with consistently. Maybe they're work friends that you sit next to and you talk to, and you have a good relationship with them. If you had to pick up your phone and call them, it wouldn't be uncomfortable. Okay, that's this ring. Okay. Then outside of that, you have, I call this the loved community. This is people that I see, and I love them, and I care for them, but I don't know a lot about them. And not in a bad way, but again, if you're in a church bigger than 20 or 30 people, you're not going to know everybody. That's just the nature of life. We don't have time to know everybody. But at the same time, I can know who is in my church. I can recognize familiar faces. I can know names. Those are people that are part of that loved community. Okay, maybe these are the work friends that you don't know a lot about, but you pass by them every day. You share an elevator up to the office, or anything that's like just a hair more than an acquaintance, okay? Like, yes, I know who they are, but if I called them at 10 p.m., it might be a little weird. I think I'll wait till morning. Okay, that's this ring, okay? wait till 9 a.m., call them during business hours. Okay, close friendships, you could probably call them between, 7 a.m. and midnight. Intimate relationships, call them any time of day. 1 a.m., they're answering your phone call. Okay, and then there's a fourth spot. There's only 3 rings because everything else outside of those rings, I call it the outside. That's everyone else. Now, I'm not saying to be rude to everyone else or to ignore everyone else, but the reality is that there's 8 billion people in this world, and you can't fit 8 billion people inside your 3 rings. Okay? So as we look to build community, I would encourage you to think about who are in my rings. Who is in each circle in my life? And I want you to be deeply honest with yourself. It may seem like more fun to pack like 60 people into this intimate relationships ring. And I would tell you that if you've done that, that's probably not healthy. And it's probably not sustainable either. Now, I would also say that maybe you have no one in the intimate relationship circle, but everyone is close friendships or further away. That's also probably not healthy or sustainable. So this is where you kind of look at, as we look at Jesus' life, we also see that as, like the diagram, you get closer to the center, the circles get smaller. So Jesus had the 3, Peter, James, and John. And then he had the 12 who were part of his close friendships. And then there were many disciples. In Acts, actually right after the ascension, they talk about replacing Judas with Matthias. And when they talk about Matthias, they said he had been with them from the beginning. So Jesus didn't just walk around with the 12 disciples. Those were the 12 that were closest from all the other disciples that he had. There were men and women that followed Jesus around that weren't the 12. And then you can see how many people are on my outside. And some of this, it might feel bad internally, but sometimes you need to move people outside of your rings. Maybe it's unhealthy for you. Maybe you just have too many people in your rings. Maybe they are harmful to you and they need to not be someone that you pour into. But as you take your time and you just decide and develop your 3 circles, that is how you can begin to pour into your community. You can recognize these are the people that I interact with. These are the people that I can pour my gifts into. Because I assure you, you cannot serve everybody. If you try to pour out and invest in someone else and be invested by someone else, and you do that to everybody, you have no bounds on your vulnerability. You have no bounds on who you say yes and no to. You are going to get worn out. You will get wiped out. And I think this sounds really contradictory to everything I've said for the last hour and a half, but I promise you it's not. Because that's the whole point of a community, is that I have my 3 circles, and I'm going to pour out. You guys, you made my 3 circles. Congratulations. You're in it. I'm pouring out right now. But you may have people in this room that aren't in your 3 circles. They may be in like the 3rd ring, but it's not rude to say that they're not in your 2nd or your 1st, okay? But when we have this community, there's a trust that if we all have 3 circles, everyone is going to be in someone else's circle. That Gerardo doesn't have to have everyone in his closest circle and in his friendship circle, and then obviously they'd fall into his other circles. It doesn't work that way. But he can have some people in his circle, and Gary can have some people in his circle, and Sharon can have some people in her circle, and I can have some people in my circle. And together, if we all are actually caring about those who are in our circles, we all will not fall through the cracks. We can recognize, hey, I trust my community to love other people. Okay, so that's a simple way for you to begin to say, where do I need to pour out, and who do I need to honestly kind of ask to be poured in by? If you have someone who's in your intimate relationship circle and you pour out into them, but they never pour into you, that's not an intimate relationship. It's not reciprocated. It's one-sided, and maybe they need to move out a ring or 2. Or you need to request, hey, I think this is a pretty close friendship. We need a little more give and take. And you can develop those relationships better. Okay, I need to hurry up because I want you guys to speak a little bit more before our discussion. So 3 circles. Everyone have a picture of that wants a picture? Wrote it down? Great. I'm going to move through. Love your neighbor like yourself. This is one of the most churchy terms in the entire world, or churchy phrases, but it's never going to get old. It'll never get old. Love your neighbor like yourself. The story of the Good Samaritan, the guy asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? Who do I need to love? And in the story, you can go and read it in the book of Luke. Jesus flips the question around and he says, you go be a good neighbor. So it's not, okay, which one of these people do I need to love? He says, no, who is going to go and love? Who you love is open-ended. It's about who is going and loving. And Jesus intentionally decided to connect all of these good neighbors together to be the church. Okay, we are all called to go and be neighbors. It's really easy to go and say, I'm going to love that person, instead of saying, I'm going to go and be loving. But that's what we're called to do. So how do we want to be a good community? We say, I'm going to go love. Community is not some external thing that we then bring into ourselves. Community is really something that starts with us, that we then externalize. It's an internal posture that we pour out of us. Say, I am going to be a part of this community. I am going to love. I am going to serve. I'm going to be graceful and merciful. Jesus calls us to see community from the inside out. Jesus wants you to ask, how can I be a good neighbor? Jesus wants you to ask, how can I be a good neighbor? And then once you've asked yourself that, he wants us all to ask, how can we be a good community? So how can you be a good neighbor, and how can we be a good community? And if we ask those two questions, we are on such a great trajectory to being a beautiful community that God has in store. So a few quick points before we go into our last discussion. How do we be a good community? We turn our focus to others. We love like Jesus loved. If you were here last week, we talked a lot about that. How's the gospel changed my life? We love like Jesus loved. If you missed it, it's on YouTube. Go watch it. You can fast forward through the discussion time, so it's probably more like 45 minutes. It's worth your time. I really believe that. We can lean into hospitality, inviting people into our homes, going into someone else's home. I think that's even tougher a lot of times nowadays. Honoring and respecting other people, encouraging people, sacrificing for other people, living a generous life. And generosity includes, but is not limited to money. It includes time. It includes mental space. It includes your prayer life. How are you going to be generous to someone else? So, our third discussion has a few questions that, again, they're simple, but they may not be easy. I would love for you to share a quick story of when was a time someone was a good neighbor to you. Not when you were a good neighbor, when someone was a good neighbor to you. Okay? And then answer the questions, how can you be a good neighbor? These are just off the top of your head, so you don't have to get it all figured out right now. That's fine. But how can you be a good neighbor? And these two questions kind of go hand in hand. What is holding you back from being a good neighbor? A lot of times we can say, oh yeah, I can go and do this, and I'll do this, and I'll do this, and I'll do this. But we never ask that last question of, what's holding me back, and we never actually get to the end. We never actually do the thing, because there's always something holding us back. Well, it costs too much, or I don't have the time, or I'm just too busy, or that person's really weird, or that place scares me, whatever it is, or I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't know what it is. What is holding you back from being a good neighbor? Okay, we have about 10-ish minutes to discuss, which is probably shorter than you've had all night, but I want to give it to you. So discuss in your groups, and then I'll wrap us up here in a couple minutes. Go. All right, everyone, I apologize. I got to cut you possibly short. I do want to say, after I officially dismiss here in a minute, if you guys want to stay and keep discussing, that's fine. I'll leave the lights on. I'll leave the questions on the screen. I'm serious. I'm totally fine with that. I just know some people have kids down the hall, and they're going to be done in about 4 minutes. So I just wanted to officially dismiss, but if you want to stay and keep discussing, that's fine by me. I love to see this. So a few quick announcements before I wrap up is tomorrow night's Thirsty Thursday has been postponed to next week because of the potential heavy snowstorm. We just wanted to let everyone know ahead of time. So the ladies' event that was tomorrow is now next week. So it'll be the 24th, not the 17th. Tomorrow's 17th. It'll be the 24th now. Same time, same place. But it'll be next week. And hopefully no snowstorm. Our next master class is, is 2 weeks from tonight. Okay, so not next week. Next week, we would love for you guys to go to, oh no, it's not there. Well, it's right here. We'd love for you to go to Thirsty Thursday, ladies. But 2 weeks from tonight, on March 2nd, we'll be asking the question, how is growth holistic, and why is it essential to my life? Okay, so that is our question for 2 weeks from now, March 2nd. I'd love for you guys to be here. I think this has been really, really great. So, again, if you show up next Wednesday night, the doors are probably, well, they'll be unlocked, but you'll have to go to youth group or Calvary Kids because we will not be having this next week. 2 weeks from tonight, that is happening. I just want to pray before we dismiss. You guys have been awesome. I love to see people actually engage in discussion. And each of those questions easily could be, a one-sentence answer, but all of you guys are like kindly upset that I'm walking on stage because you just have more to discuss, and that's great. That's a dream. So I love that. But I want to pray and officially dismiss. Lord, we are so thankful that you've called us to be together. We're thankful that we have your good news, that you came and you died and you rose and you gave us your spirit and you've given us direction on how to live a good life, how to flourish and how to follow the fruit of the Spirit. And I'm thankful that you've called us to do that together. Or that you haven't just said, here's a list of things, go do them. Hopefully you can make it on your own. But you said, no, here's a heart, and here's a heart for you guys to have together as a community, as a family, as a church. I'm thankful for this church and this community and this space, Lord. Thank you for everyone who is here tonight. Thank you for blessing the discussion. I pray you continue to bless each person as they continue to ponder these questions. Lord, that tomorrow and next week and next month and this year, that these are things that are on our hearts, that we continually ask ourselves, Lord, how can I be a good neighbor? That we continually ask ourselves collectively, how can we be a good community? Lord, we're grateful for you and your presence and all the goodness that you are, Lord. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right, thankful that you guys are here. No pressure. If you want to stick around, you can. If you need to go, awesome. We are so glad that you guys are here tonight. she subs sometimes, so honestly, she's the only one that really, unfortunately, can answer that question. I'm not trying to be John or punt it, but I honestly don't know her schedule until a day or two beforehand, most of the time. Actually, could you help me get